I am very happy and excited to be here today with Matthew Savage. Welcome, Matthew, in our Leadership to Go series, which we are interviewing leaders, and we believe leadership is everywhere. It's within every person from all walks of life. And it's such a pleasure to be with Matthew. I'll do a little introduction and then hand over to Matthew. I've known Matthew for many years. I'm trying to think, like 13 at least.
Yeah, it is about 13 years. Yep.
And I first met Matthew here in Vienna. He was the principal of the international school where both of my daughters went to school. And he was, and I think I'll make him blush saying this, but a very instrumental person in both their lives and our entire family's life. So I hold him with very, very high regard. And in our whole family, the name Matthew Savage is a very loved name. And through these years, Matthew has gone on to become the principal of various schools around the world. And now he is owning his own business, and he's a consultant, and he consults other schools about inclusivity and well-being at schools. This is the story I know of Matthew. So it's shaping the youth in our world. So I really appreciate everything that you do. Thank you, Matthew. Warm welcome.
Thank you so much, Pari. And there are only a few families into whom I've bumped over the years that still hold as deep a place in my heart as yours does. So it's a pleasure still to be talking with you these days and to be joining you on this conversation today. It's funny, you talk about me owning my own business, and I struggle with that because I kind of just do stuff that's I find fun and that I feel that other people will find fun and that will enrich others' lives in some ways. And sure, there's a transactional element to it, but the idea of me owning my own business suggests I have a strategic plan and that I've really thought it all out. And I wish I did sometimes, but I just sort of bounce and float in different directions, which is fun, disorientating, but really, really fun.
And I love that you say that, because that's what leadership is, I think, right? We don't have the answers. It's not as though we start with a strategy most times. And part of what you're saying is that your heart was in it. You did it because it's something you have passion for and that you love. And I find there's so much impact when you do that in your work.
I think if you encounter anybody who's doing something that they love, there comes with that a truth, an authenticity, and a life that you can't ignore. So yeah, I think you know when someone is doing something that they love, and I certainly do love doing what I do now.
And Matthew and I both have colds today.
Yeah, excuse me for
Every
that a
time
little bit.
I go quiet, it's because I'm coughing in the background, so I'm trying to mute myself so that isn't heard. And my voice is a little croaky today, Matthew. So much for authenticity.
Yeah, and I'm desperately trying not to sneeze. And, when the sneeze is about to come, and I'm trying to just say no, wait, and we'll see what happens.
Control that. When I sneeze, the house shakes. So could you share a little bit of your journey with us? What took you to schools, to education? How did you go down that line?
Well, I used to want to be a theatre director. When I was at university, I started my own theatre company. We did 3 or 4 productions. Started to communicate with the very young Sam Mendes at that point, talked about taking work to the London Fringe. I just realized that I was working with people who were 20, 21, 22, 23. And I just got a sense that I would have much more rewarding time working with children and young people. So that's what kind of flicked the switch that sent me down the road of teacher training, and then my teaching and leadership career that followed. But I think I'd always been hungry for the next step from a very young age. I grew up in quite a challenging household, and I often found refuge in my work, in my academics. Therefore, I was always desperate to improve, desperate to do brilliantly. I felt that if somehow I had that performative edge, this would validate me as a human being. And when I entered the workplace, it was the same. I wanted to become a middle leader, then I wanted to become a senior leader, then I wanted to become a deputy head, and then I wanted to become a head teacher and a principal, and always looking for the next step. And I think that characterized my leadership journey, kind of hurtling through to when I took over the whole school principalship of an award-winning school in the Middle East, in Jordan, in fact. And then I was there. I was, in terms of the international education sector, it was a pinnacle, right? Leading a really successful school. I felt like a conductor a lot of the time on the better days, right? That all the different musicians doing, in a sense, their own thing, but it was me there just to kind of conduct and ensure that we were, playing together. And I loved it on good days. But it's a draining business leading a school. And I've always been someone who does all, it's either all or nothing, and I could never do nothing, and therefore I have to do all. So I think it was inevitable that at some point I would need not a reduction in pace, but just a change in pace and rhythm. And I think that's what led me to move from school leadership into doing what I do now. So I guess that was my leadership journey, if that answers your question.
I just realized I was muted. Okay, no. I was just listening to Matthew, and I realized we talk when I talk to different leaders, we always talk about how lonely the journey is. When you're up there conducting and you're watching everyone, and you feel the burden of this musical piece that has to be perfect, and it's you alone holding that weight, and it's a very lonely journey. I think you also just mentioned that as well.
Yeah, I think it is lonely. It's lonely at the top. I think that's a cliche that holds true. And certainly there's something strange about the international education sector, because I was the principal of a large, successful, high-profile international school in a very complicated part of the world, and I felt like, and I don't think it was self-aggrandizement or vanity, because I don't think I have those two qualities, but I felt like sometimes the whole school community was looking to me for the answers, was looking to me for the solutions. So often I would have students or parents or staff looking to me directly to solve whatever problems they might be having within or outside of school. And I did certainly feel that there wasn't really anyone looking out for my challenges or problems. So yeah, I do think it was a lonely business, and I certainly felt that, and I think I absorbed all of that. And in reflection, I'm somewhat obsessed at the moment with the work of the Bateson Institute, and the work of Gregory Bateson and Nora Bateson. And Gregory Bateson, the ecologist, once wrote, "It is not just that and nothing more." And that's kind of a maxim by which I live and work at the moment. But when I think back to 2020, and I was isolated in Amman at the height of the pandemic, and military enforced lockdowns, and all my family had gone back to the UK the previous year, but I had 2 TIAs, or mini strokes, and who knows how these came about. Would they have happened anyway? Was it due to lifestyle factors when I'm not looking after myself? Or had I been absorbing so many of everybody else's issues and challenges and problems that eventually you can't soak up anymore, right? And maybe the body protests. So I'm not for a second blaming my many strokes on my job, because it's not just that and nothing more, right? But I think that these have to be interrelated in some way, definitely.
Yeah.
So the loneliness of leadership, I think,
Yeah.
but I think it's changing. A lot of school leaders I know now have professional coaches. I'm a leadership coach myself. I would have loved to have a coach. If I spoke to a coach each week throughout my leadership career, I would have been so much happier, so much more successful, and wouldn't have made half the missteps that I did. So I think things are getting better, but yeah, it's still lonely at the top.
Yeah. And a lot of what you said right now is the leadership journey we see as well. Um, in the sense that it is lonely at the top, there's a lot of responsibility on your shoulders, and that work-life balance gets blurred. And exactly what you said, not looking out for yourself and not energizing yourself and not taking, you took on, you absorbed too many of everyone else's problems. And I think, that's a conversation I have with a lot of my clients as well, who are leaders. How do we protect ourselves in a way? How do we look after ourselves? How do we know the boundaries and how to really find the right balance of work and life? And I know this is a little harsh, but I always say at the end of the day, work, that's it. No one's going to care very much if you're there or if
Yeah,
you're not. You're so replaceable in your
yeah.
work, but you're not replaceable to your family and people who love you. It's harder, obviously, the loss like that. So your health comes first, and I do see the shift that many leaders are shifting to that. And Matthew, thank you for sharing as well that you had these mini strokes, and it made me realize that you took that position where you were, and whatever the cause of the mini strokes, you turned that threat into you grew from that. You grew into what you have now. I'd love you to tell us about that moment.
Yeah, I guess we're all growing from our past experience, aren't we? And our challenges, our adversity can make us stronger and better. They don't automatically. They can drag us down and be to our detriment. But I think we do grow from things. And I don't know. When you talk about work-life balance, I think it's something even now I really struggle with. I certainly struggled with when I was a school leader. And my family lost out. My kids lost out at times when my kids really needed me so much more than I was able to give. And so if I could turn back the clock, I'd do that so differently, right? But even now, like my health has continued to deteriorate since the mini strokes, and now I'm fully reliant on a wheelchair to move around, and my health is delicate and fragile and deteriorating. And so my neurologist says I should be working 50%, like half time, and that's it. And yet, am I? Can I say no to anything? No, I'm working every hour available, and I try and unpick why that is. Is that because I'm trying to prove something, and if so, to whom? It's going to be some internal voices, not anyone else external. Is it because from such an early age, I associated my validity and my worth with academic prowess, which is a very performative external thing that I feel that without the pursuit of that, the worth, the value disappear? Is it fear for the future that my health continues to deteriorate, or what if whilst I'm doing well now, in a year's time the work dries up, better say yes to everything now? Or whether it's just in my nature, whether just there's a workaholic in me that just really loves to work. So yeah, the work-life balance thing I certainly have struggled with and continue to struggle with.
Yeah. It's when you were talking about that, I was also in my head thinking, what is it that drives you? Where do you get your energy from? So I know I have to give you a little bit of time till we're
I was
doing the
trying not
mute
to.
button from time to time
Yeah,
when I have to cough, when you have to
yeah.
sneeze.
I was trying not to sneeze on cameras. It's rather unattractive. Sorry, what was the question you asked when I was in
Where
full
did you
blow?
get this energy and this drive from? It's just so remarkable.
Um, I don't know. I think that I mean, to be really vulnerable and honest with you, I think I'm running away from something rather than running towards something. So drive, I don't know if it's the right word for me, because drive was just, I want to get there, I want to get there. I want this drive to get to that destination and then to the next and to the next. But oftentimes I think instead I'm running away from stuff, running away from my past, running away from mistakes, running away
Mm.
from adverse experiences. And perhaps that is the thing
Yeah.
that's driving me,
Yeah.
so to speak. So, yeah, I don't know where the drive comes from, whether it's something over there in the distance that's pulling me towards it, or whether it's
Yeah.
various monsters behind me that are chasing me. Hard to tell. That's an interesting one.
And thank you for that honesty, Matthew. A lot of times, people think it's the destination. So they're running towards this destination. But I think that's such a lovely, when you were talking about maybe it's something you're running from, we don't realize what is it really that's motivating us over here. And a lot of times at the end of it, we realize it was the journey. The journey was the whole part, the it's the journey of what we transform into, what we become. And I think that's so powerful. And just knowing you, I do know some of that journey. So maybe with your permission, I'll shift a little bit to ask you about your current work. And I know that you're consulting schools and you're a leadership coach to educational establishments. And can you tell us? I know you work a little bit on inclusive environments and well-being. Why is that important?
Well, yeah, I describe my work as exploring the intersection between well-being and diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging through the prism of triangulated warm and street data, all of which boiled down, the essence of that is I help schools to ensure every single child can be seen, be heard, be known, and belong, like without condition, without exception. And for me, that is total inclusivity. The school that is not inclusive of every child is inclusive of none. It's an absolute. And I think it's the most important duty we have as schools, to be places where every single child and adult who comes through our gates at the start of the day feels like they belong,
Yeah.
and feels like they can thrive.
Yeah. That's so beautiful. We struggle with our organizations. We're constantly talking and using these words: diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging, and there's so much stigma. There's so much biases, unconscious biases, conscious biases. How do you do that in your work? How do you create these kinds of environments in a school? What has to change?
Well, even though I'm an English major, and the written and spoken word are my drug, I'm also a numbers person. I must get it from my dad. He's an accountant. And so what I do is I help schools to harness the healing power of quantitative data to identify their margins. And once we've identified their margins, who is on the margins of their community, then we go about harnessing and hearing the stories from those margins. And the better that we understand those stories, the better that we understand the lived experience of those who inhabit those margins, the better we can start to adapt the whole institution such that it is inclusive of everybody in our school community. So I think that's what I do with schools. And yeah, it's about total inclusivity, because in almost every school I've ever worked in, with, or for, the margins, they're quite big.
Yeah.
I think that schools incentivize inauthenticity. So there are so many structures and expectations which require us to be inauthentic, to put on masks, to pretend we are someone that we're not. And so it's so easy to be oblivious to who is marginalized and the effects of that marginalization, unless you really dig deep.
Yeah.
You listen out for the weak signals, you tune into the frequency of the voices on those margins. And that's what I try and do with the schools with whom I work.
Yeah. And I'm just wondering, how receptive are the schools to that when you share this data with them?
Well, you have to understand that there's almost 15,000 international schools, I think, in the world these days. And my client list over the last 3 years has maybe been 100 or 150 of those. So I work with the schools who want to work with me. I'm not a good salesperson. I'm not very good at putting myself out there. Generally, I'm invited to work with schools who are already hungry. They have some sort of appetite. Sometimes they don't quite know where that appetite will take them, but I'm very fortunate that they've already got that hunger. So there is a receptiveness, certainly for at the leadership level. I think at a teacher level, educator level, there's a fear because teachers are rightly scared of data, because data's been a stick with which they've been beaten throughout their career, right? And we're all scared of change. And if what I bring is certainly not a wrecking ball, but an interrogative lens that will probably help identify challenges, issues, difficulties of which the whole school community was not necessarily aware, that can be frightening too. So yeah, at leadership level, I'm invited, so there's some receptiveness, but also there comes with it fear, and I have to handle that.
I can totally understand the fear that comes with it. And so much of what you say, in my head, I keep thinking organizations. And you said it's the 15,000 international schools, and a handful might come to you. So the schools who are prepared, who I'm not going to say curious, but somehow they're asking these questions. Something has brought them there. And a lot of organizations, I sort of relate that to surveys like employee engagement survey, the well-being survey, now mental health survey. There's so many different surveys, but it's interesting because the companies who do those surveys, they might be afraid of the results, but they do want to create that inclusive space and an engaged workforce. So you have to have that, in a way, a mindset to do it, right?
Yeah, and I think you're right, and I'm a big fan of well-being and mental health surveys, but they come with health warnings, right? Because sometimes you can do so many surveys that one of the reasons for poor well-being is that you're asking them to do all these surveys. And also, I think if I'm to be authentic, if I'm to be really honest in my responses to any survey about my mental health, my well-being, my wellness, my belonging, I've got to feel safe in the first place. So if you don't have a culture which explicitly puts well-being and belonging first, it's pointless doing the surveys because no one's going to be honest. And secondly, I need to trust what's going to happen with that information. Will that information be protected? Could it be weaponized? With whom will it or will it not be shared? And then I've got to know that there's going to be impact, because if there's not any impact, I'm going to stop engaging with the surveys. I remember the first time that I flew and I was using my wheelchair. Not I flew in my wheelchair, it's not that magic, but first time that I traveled on a plane as a disabled traveler. And the plane landed, and an hour went by after everyone else had left before I was allowed to disembark. And I complained. And the second time it happened, I complained, and the third and the fourth. After that, you know what? I stopped complaining because you know what? Nothing was going to change. And I think we need to be very wary of that when implementing well-being surveys in any organization. We need to be very intentional and transparent and explicit about the why of it, and to demonstrate. Issuing a survey brings with it a duty to reach positive impact. Absolutely. And to be transparent about that impact. And you talk about organizational health. I mean, a school is an organization just as any of the organizations with which you work, right? And so the principles of a healthy organization are common across most industries, probably. But I talk about the adults, at least in a school, and it also often comes back to belonging. If I feel like I belong, then, and all my peers, colleagues, they all feel like they belong, and that's a healthy workplace, right? So I think that's where it needs to start.
Absolutely, Matthew. And you said all of those key points over there. Psychological safety. You have to know that it's a safe environment. You have to know action's going to be taken. It's not just lip service, that really change, their voices will be heard. And then, so that is quite a journey as well when you do any of these surveys. And coming back to your work with the schools, it reminded me when we're talking about that, how important the head of the school is. Whoever initiates these programs, they have to have the right attitude, mindset, also for the intentions and the consequences that come with that.
Oh, 100%. If the ultimate head of the school does not believe that well-being and belonging should come before anything else.
Yeah.
Because, not that we need the research, but the research is there that proves that if we put well-being and belonging first, academics will rise, right? And if we put academics first, for lots of kids, well-being will wither. If you don't have that belief in the overall head, principal, head of school, director, whatever job title they have, then the change is not going to happen, right? Because it's not actually believed in at the top. So it's critical that whoever is at the top of an organization has a sincere, honest belief in the importance of well-being and belonging. And if they do, that's a really good starting point. That's not a guarantee that the organization is going to be healthy, because it's one complicated ecosystem, right? But it's a really good start.
Very true. I'll move on, Matthew, and I know this has been such a lovely discussion so far. I could keep talking, but I know your time is also limited. The question about an inclusive environment and growing these young minds. What are the skills what are the skills you believe we need in the future leaders, future workforce?
Well, there's so much talk about future skills, aren't there? And they used to be, or are still, called soft skills, or I think that's rather demeaning to these skills that actually are far harder than any of the supposedly hard ones. There's a lot of talk around these future skills. A lot of talk about technology, a lot of talk about being able to shape and harness technology rather than technology taking over. So I think that's a key part of future skills. But for me, that's not my area of expertise. For me, when I think of the skills that young people need in order to rescue and heal this bruised and broken planet that we're handing to them, I think they need to be rebels. I think they need to be rebellious, right? They need to have the courage and the will to break rules. I think they need to stay curious, never, ever lose that curiosity. I used to talk about it being a candle of curiosity that burns bright when a child is in the early years, and gradually we put it out as they get move further up through their schooling. Stay curious and put your own mental health first. And I think, though there are many other future skills, I think those three will get you a long way. So rebel, stay curious, put your mental health first, and play, because some of the best things in life have come about through human beings playing, and I think that we need more of that.
I think that's such good advice. I love all of that. I love still being a rebel, and the playfulness for sure. I think they're very good, very, very good advice. Andrew, I said Andrew, Matthew, sorry. Matthew, what
You can call me what you like. It's fine, Harry.
tell me, just a curious question. What advice would you give your younger self?
Wow. Wow. That's a big one. So I without going into too much detail here, I suffered quite serious adverse childhood experience. And what happens when you suffer trauma as a child, it seeps down into your soil, and it will grow and sprout in ugly and violent ways when you're older. So lots of the advice I'd give my younger self would be about how to deal with that, how to process that, how to really work proactively to clean out those wounds rather than just putting band-aids on them, right? So I think I'd give myself lots of mental health advice. As a leader, I would advise myself to be more honest. I don't mean transactionally honest. I'm always honest in every conversation I have. I mean more authentic. I wish I had been able to be, or felt able to be, more vulnerable. It's weird, in the last 3 years or so, since I've started working in training and consultancy, I talk about things to do with myself that I never would have dreamt of talking about, often to large audiences of complete strangers. I call it vulnerability. My 2 kids call it oversharing. But I think I was so determined as a leader when I was in schools to ensure everybody always saw that I was happy, that I was bursting with energy, that I could find the solutions for every problem, and nothing would floor me. I would be strong at all times. And I was so desperate that that was what came across. And I think it made me the weaker leader for it. So another piece of advice I'd give myself is take off some of those masks and
Yeah,
be vulnerable,
yeah.
because I think that inspires, it comforts, and it leads.
And it's so true. And a lot of my work, when I talk to leaders and we talk about being vulnerable, it comes with age. Somehow when they're younger, when we're younger, we try to keep up that, as you say, the masks. But gradually through life, we learn to take them off. It's a very, very special parts of life, I think.
Yeah, I think it is. A couple of weeks ago, I deactivated my Facebook account. I haven't deleted it because who knows what will happen in the future, but I deactivated it for a number of reasons. One, pertaining to my own mental health, I think it's good to avoid as many distractions like that because you just doom scroll or you envy scroll through other people's lives. But also, I deactivated it because I feel a bit tired of the pressure I feel to show only my positive sides, right? If you looked at my Facebook feed, you'd have seen someone who was always always on holiday. Sorry, it was always sunny. Now I live on the Isle of Skye in Scotland, where it's sunny about 2 days a year, right? But again, my Facebook feed said I was always happy, always on holiday, and it was always sunny. And I just grew tired of that because I'm tired of wearing those masks. And I think social media is one example of where lots of us still do that,
Yeah.
right? So yeah, with age, as I would never say that I have acquired wisdom, but I've certainly become more honest
Yeah.
about who I am, more authentic, and more vulnerable.
Yeah. I just want to mention to you that I and you are connected on Facebook. So if you're not on Facebook, I have no way of being in touch with you. just 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 to mention that.
Yeah, I know, and there's so many beautiful friendships that I've kept alive through Facebook, and I can still contact those people through Messenger because Messenger is still
We'll do
independent
that. We'll do that.
of Facebook. But I just felt I needed a
Yeah.
break
I-
from it, and it was
I'm
tied in
glad
with the
you did.
conversation we were having about age and
Yeah,
taking off those masks, and
I
I
know.
just feel that social media is a place where so many people wear masks, and sometimes that can get tiring, I think.
Yeah. And I mean, we say that as adults. I know young children who the pressure of social media, my own daughter, she's now been off social media for ages and
Yeah,
just doesn't, there's too much pressure
yeah.
of what you need to show the world, So I think it's such a strong stand as well that we don't necessarily have to be on social media. There are other
Yeah, and
things.
I'm
Yeah,
not demonizing it. I think that for many people, social media actually gives a connectedness that they would not otherwise have, and they have connections that they would not otherwise be able to maintain, and it gives them a community, a sense of belonging. I know
absolutely.
of numerous young people who have actually stayed well, and in some cases stayed alive because of social media. So I'm not meaning to demonize it per se, just that for me, I'm just taking a break
Yeah,
because I
yeah,
want to just, yeah, be relieved of that probably internal pressure, right? Because
yeah,
most pressure that any of us feel comes not from someone else, does it? It comes from inside. I just want to break from that internal pressure
yeah,
uh, to perform, to show myself in my best light at all
yeah.
times.
Matthew, I know it took a lot longer, but my last question to you, and really thank you for everything you have shared with us. It's been such an informative and amazing interview. And also, you and I have managed not to cough or sneeze too much.
Quite impressive, really, isn't it?
I know,
I'm gonna sneeze for the next half an hour after
I
we
know.
finish, but
I'm already losing my voice after this. The last question I'd love to just for the next person we interview, I'd like to get you to give a question. What would your question be to whoever we interview next?
I would want them to be asked the following question: how do we keep hope? How do we retain hope? Hope is so essential to our species and to our planet.
Hmm.
And yet there are so many reasons why it may be draining away from us. So my question would be, how do we keep hope?
It's a big question. Thank you, Matthew.
You're
Thank you so
welcome. It
much. It was amazing. I really appreciate it.
No, it was a pleasure talking to you as always, Pari, and I've really, really enjoyed this conversation. Coughing and sneezing aside.
We can continue coughing and sneezing when I stop.